Dave Biddle, editor, Bucknuts 247, covers Ohio State, joins us on Sick on 365 Radio. Dave, first of all, Ohio State's good. They're always good. They're supposed to be good. What were a couple of the questions in particular you thought that they needed to deal with during the offseason, and they get the answers in your opinion?
Yeah, the biggest question for them is certainly the offensive line. I think the starters are good. They could be even better than that, but depth is a huge concern. And even with the starters, there's some guys, that are moving into new spots, and they're losing two, pretty good offensive linemen. Not guys that will go in the first round, but probably guys that will be second-day picks, and Nicholas Petit-Ferrer and Thayer Munford, second-round, third-round guys, maybe fourth round at the very worst. So we'll see. So the offensive line, not just the starters, but definitely the depth is the biggest concern. And then the defense overall. They were bad defensively last year, 59th in the country. Brought in Jim Knowles from Oklahoma State and paid him a lot of money. And early returns are, talking to the players and people around the program are very good, but the proof will be in the pudding. So offensive line's a concern. Defense is a concern, but they do have talent both on the O-line and all over their defense.
So do they think overall that the scheme was the biggest issue and not the guys out on the field?
Yeah, it definitely, in my opinion, was more the scheme. Now, they also were very young last year, so I think even if they had a great defensive coordinator, they would not have been an elite defense last year by any means, but they would have been better. The scheme was a mess. The Oregon game last year was nothing like I've ever seen, where it was just like they just kept doing the same thing over and over again. Ohio State never adjusted. And Oregon ended up being a pretty average team last year, as we all know. So, Michigan could do whatever they wanted. And Michigan had a decent offense last year, but Ohio State was way too predictable, I think. But they were also young. So, again, I don't think they would have been an elite defense, no matter who the defensive coordinator would have been. But they would have been a lot better than what they were last year. They were, borderline terrible defensive last year. Even though they're 59th in the country, that almost doesn't sound terrible, considering there's 130 D1 teams. But their schedule wasn't that tough, especially when you consider the offensive teams that they played last year. They didn't play elite offenses last year. As I said, who are the offenses that carved them up? Oregon ended up being an average team. Michigan, more of a defensive team than an offensive team. And those are the offenses that carved them up. Other offenses did well against them. So even being 59th is almost misleading. If you did strength of schedule and added that in, they were probably more like 80th, in my opinion, in the country in total defense. So we'll see. They'll improve, guys. My question is, how much will they improve? I think they'll improve and be like a top 40 defense. And along with this offense, which will be elite, that could be enough. We'll see, though. Proof will be in the pudding. We'll see how much they improve defensively.
Dave, that wide receiver core last year just was absolutely filthy, and I know they couldn't have everybody on the field all at the same time throughout, but Olave, who was just incredible, he moves off to the NFL. Garrett Wilson, same thing, and then Jackson Smith and Jigba, like Wilson was from down here in Texas, just had the monster performance to close out the season. I know he's back. What does the wide receiver core look like around him?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's obviously the number one, as you said, and then not backing him up, but the other two, they start three wide receivers. The other two guys will be Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka in whatever order. They'll, all three of those guys will be starters: Jackson Smith and Jigba, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Emeka Egbuka. Egbuka was the number one wide receiver in the country according to 24/7 Sports Composite in the 2021 class. He's going to be a sophomore. Marvin Harrison Jr. was one of the top 10 wide receivers in that same class. Probably was a little underrated, which is crazy considering who his father was and how big this young man was and how good he was in high school. But even though he was a four-star, I think I can make the argument he was a little underrated. So it'll be Jackson Smith and Jigba, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka, and then we'll see from there. Julian Fleming is in line to be their number 4 receiver. He was the number 1 wide receiver in the country in the 2020 class. He was a little overrated, in my opinion. Jackson Smith and Jigba, should have been rated higher than him. Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think, was the number 4 wide receiver in the country. But yeah, man, they're definitely stacked at wide receiver, and C.J. Stroud is one of the early favorites to win the Heisman. We'll see. It's going to come down to that offensive line because they are loaded at wide receiver, and it's not just those top 3 guys. They do have some decent depth there behind them with guys like Julian Fleming and others. And their running backs, they've got fantastic running backs and depth there. But how is that offensive line going to be? And if they have injuries there, can they withstand those? And one thing I'm looking at, guys, is are they going to look? I'm sure they are looking. Are they going to land an offensive lineman in the portal? It's kind of late now in the process, but I have no doubt they're going to be looking. And, but they kind of feel like their starting five is set. So it'd have to be, that's the thing. If you're an offensive lineman, you want to come to Ohio State, there might not be a starting spot. It'd have to be a depth guy. But that's the big concern for Ohio State is the offensive line.
Well, I know one thing, Dave. 2 years ago, Baylor's offensive line was a wreck, and they couldn't run the ball. They couldn't do anything. They landed, Jacob Gall from Buffalo and also Grant Miller from Vanderbilt, and also a new offensive line coach, a new wide zone system, and it was like night and day. It was phenomenal. Of course, there weren't really five. That's the difference, as you were talking about. Ohio State kind of knows theirs as well. Let me ask you this, and I don't mean how much would there have been any competition whatsoever with the kind of year that C.J. Stroud had and how good he was? Would there have been any competition had Quinn Ewers stayed?
Not in my opinion, no. No, I mean, you talk about, they liked him. And what's interesting about it, I think people think maybe Quinn Ewers was, hated in the locker room. The guys still, keep in touch with him. I think that says a lot. I think that people think that he was a guy that was persona non grata. He just young kid that did what he thought was best for him at the time. But no, to answer your question, C.J. Stroud was way ahead of him last year, and then you saw what C.J. Stroud did. And it's funny, after a couple of games, even though it was all on the defense, you had Buckeye fans wondering, "Oh man, is C.J. Stroud really the guy?" Yeah. And then he ends up having a tremendous year. Now you look at NFL draft. Mock drafts for next year. A lot of people have him as the number one overall pick, and even though Bryce Young won the Heisman, Bryce Young's only about 6 foot tall. C.J. Stroud's every bit of 6'3", 220. NFL draft analysts love him. So to answer your question, CJ, we'll see about Quinn Ewers, but there's no doubt in my mind, and I'm sure Ryan Day would be the first to admit this if you gave him some truth serum. It wouldn't even be close if right now C.J. Stroud and Quinn Ewers. Forget Kyle McCord and Devin Brown, who they both love at Ohio State as well. Both guys were highly rated quarterbacks, the number 2 and 3 quarterbacks here at Ohio State. Forget about those guys. If it was just C.J. Stroud against Quinn Ewers, in my opinion, it wouldn't even be a close battle right now.
Dave, is there any kind of concern about a sea change in the Big Ten right now with Michigan State having the strong year that they had last year and Michigan winning the league, or most people thinking, well, you can't win them all. Sometimes you're going to have a slight dip.
Yeah, people, then we'll see. This is, be careful what you say, but most people, I don't think just here in Ohio, but across the Big Ten, not in the state of Michigan probably, certainly not in Ann Arbor. I'll just speak for people in Ohio. They think it's a one-year aberration. That, okay, Michigan got theirs, and it wasn't a fluke. They took it to Ohio State. They had, the fans were into it. They took it to them. It wasn't a fluke at all. Michigan was the better team, and they took it to them. But Ohio State fans are like, okay, the last Saturday of November this year is real. It's going to come, and it's going to be a bad day for Michigan. That's the sentiment here in Ohio. We'll see. Michigan's going to be a good team again, but they're going to be, they'll take a step back defensively. We'll see how much of one. Just like we're talking about Ohio State's defense, how much of a step forward can they take? How much of a step back will Michigan's defense take? Will it be a massive step, or will it just be a little step? Their offense will be good. I think their offense will be better. A lot of guys back on offense, pretty much their whole offense back. But this is our first time coming to Ohio Stadium in 4 years because the game was canceled in 2020. One of the many things we love about 2020, the game was canceled. Not that it still bothers me or anything. So to answer your question, people think it was a one-year aberration, but I guarantee Michigan fans don't think that. They think this is the changing of the guard, which makes it fun. We'll see what happens.
Dave, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about the tragedy that occurred here recently with Dwayne Haskins, his untimely and just completely unforeseen passing at such a young age. I know that the tributes have poured out from Columbus, and guys have had his name on their jerseys and things like that. But just kind of what has it been like? Was just receiving that news and kind of the mourning process throughout Columbus over the passing of young Dwayne Haskins?
Yeah, it was one of those where you see the news and you're just like, oh no, and then you just can't make sense out of it. And we're still, we don't know all the details yet. I don't think everybody even needs to know all the details, but it's just so sad. One of the things, I'm sure you guys know this, but one of the things about Dwayne, other than, that fantastic year at Ohio State, and even that his redshirt freshman year, he saved the Michigan game. They were losing at Michigan in 2017. He comes in the third quarter and then leads them to victory, and then 2018 has the best season by a Big Ten quarterback ever. But guys, I think what you would love about him was even when he became that superstar in 2018 as a third-year sophomore, his final year at Ohio State, he never changed. He's a great young man. Was always courteous to us in the media, and it was real. He was just a good not even good. He was a great young man, and so sad. He was so close with like his sister, and his family was very tight. So I appreciate you asking me about it. He was a fantastic young man, and it's still. I mean, it still doesn't feel real. It's so sad.
You know, one more thing. You're right. It was horrible, and it's still to this day. The Ryan Day and what he's done. We've seen coaches take over programs that were really good and loaded up. The cupboard was full, and it's not always easy. Have you been not surprised, but have you been impressed at how Ryan Day has kept that thing motoring along? I know last year wasn't perfect, but what he's done in his time since taking over.
I have been. If you had asked me when he was hired, I was skeptical at first because I'm like, this is Ohio State. They didn't even interview anybody else. They're just promoting from within. I'm like, that's not how you do business here at Ohio State. And I like Ryan Day. I quickly learned that I was wrong, so I'm not surprised anymore. But to answer your question, absolutely. I mean, at first I'm thinking, listen, you're replacing Urban Meyer, who's a legend, and you're replacing him with a guy that's never been a head coach before at Ohio State. I mean, what are you doing? And you're not even bringing in. And if you think Ryan Day's your man, this is what I said at the time. This is how stupid I sound. I'm like, if Ryan Day is your man, okay, fine. Bring in other people and at least interview them, right? Bring in other people, at least bring in a few people and interview them. And then if Ryan Day's still your man after that process, fine. Gene Smith didn't. The athletic director didn't do that. He knew Ryan Day was his man. And I give Gene Smith a lot of credit. That took cojones, and it's worked out very well. And Ryan Day is not just a really good coach, in my opinion. I mean, he's a great man. He's doing a lot of great things with mental health. Bringing that to the forefront where tough macho football players can feel comfortable talking about mental health issues, which I think is fantastic. So Ryan Day, I'm happy to admit I was wrong about that. And again, I liked him. I didn't think it was going to be a disaster, but I was like skeptical. And certainly I'm not skeptical at all any longer. I think he's one of the top coaches in college football.
Dave, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Good stuff. Ohio State Buckeyes, Ryan Day, Dave Biddle, editor of Bucknuts on 247, CBS Network, and also does a talk show on The Money, 97.1 The Fan, Sundays from 9 until 11. And he said Bengals fan and Reds sufferer.
Yeah.
It's been a long time for the Reds.
Yeah.
Derek Smith's a big Reds fan, and it's tough.
Well, Dwayne Haskins, I saw there was a report today that I actually got 911 call from his wife who was calling because apparently he had run out of gas. And so she was calling his phone and he wasn't answering. And I guess at one point she reached the operator and they told her we'll just tell you there's an incident in the area, in the vicinity, but we can't tell you any information, which I mean, you can only imagine what that must have felt like, that uncertainty. But that starts to make more sense of, people, I think everybody's wondering, why was he walking around over there? Well, it might have been he had run out of gas. And, I'm sure there will be a final report and all that. But, yeah, just such a tragedy. And, that was my thoughts, too, when we were talking about it right after it happened. It was just, when I watched Washington draft him and just all those post-draft interviews and all of that, and then, seeing how excited he was when they drafted Terry McLaurin, his teammate, not too much later. He came across as just such a good, likable guy, and clearly he was, and clearly he made a big impact in Columbus during his time there. It's just, man, such a tragedy. But yeah, for Ohio State, interesting that the Michigan game went the other direction. That was something we hadn't seen in quite some time. But they are loaded for bear once again. I cannot wait to see how Jackson Smith and Jigba follows up last year. I mean, terrific player, Rockwall guy. So I'm sure he's going to be on that Earl Campbell Award quite a bit this season.
Oh, my God. He was a machine at Rockwall, caught what it seemed like 12 to 15 passes, set the record. Just amazing. And then what he did in the bowl game was just sick. You're right. And then they have Olave, Garrett Wilson. I mean,
that receiving core last year, I mean, that was absolutely filthy, dude. I mean, Smith and Jigba, Wilson and Olave, that was, man.
And then not to have, didn't Olave wasn't they playing the bowl game?
No,
I can't remember.
I think it was Wilson.
Because they had like injuries throughout. Wilson got dinged up, and Olave got dinged up, I believe.
But imagine game planning going, listen, we don't have two of the best three guys. Like, look, here's what we'll do. We'll just throw all their passes to him.
He had like 15 catches or 200 and 300 yards. It was ridiculous. I want to kind of look up that game before we break. We'll come back. Travis Reeder, Sick on 365 Radio, and a college football analyst will join us in the next segment as well. Here is Njigba had 15 catches, 347 yards, and 3 touchdowns.
How many passes did Stroud throw?
46.
So a third of the passes went over there.
Maybe two or three.
He caught 30, yeah.
He threw for 573 and 6. And I was one of those, by the way, when they struggled early defensively, where I was like, is C.J. Stroud? I'm an idiot to even bring that up because he was fantastic.
I know we got to go, but I was, reflecting on Baylor's quarterbacks in this piece I did, closing out this series, just kind of, looking back on last year, and it was a lot rockier than I remembered. But a big part of that was Jim Knowles' defense in that early Oklahoma State game, and they were solid throughout. I think he's going to do well in Columbus, and I think he'll bring that dose of D that they've been looking for.
When you do go to the premium section, if you're a member, Sikkim365.com, that interview with us is on or in the premium section, and it's labeled Jalen Bridges. Coach Drew jumped into my arms when I committed, so thanks for getting that up on Sikkim 365. When we come back, Travis Reeder breaks down quarterback